the moment you stop talking, they start revealing everything. Kevin is in a tense conversation with a coworker who's been taking credit for his work. He's prepared his points. He's ready to defend himself. But something tells him to try a different approach. So when his coworker finishes their explanation, Kevin just stops. He doesn't argue, doesn't fill the silence, just looks at them and waits. And in that silence, something shifts. His coworker starts rambling, over-explaining, contradicting themselves. The confident mask cracks, and Kevin realizes he didn't need to say anything at all. The silence did the work for him. Here's what most people don't understand about silence. It's not passive. It's not weakness. It's one of the most powerful tools you have, because while you're comfortable in the quiet, most people are absolutely terrified of it. And that terror makes them do things they wouldn't normally do. Say things they didn't plan to say. Reveal things they wanted to keep hidden. Think of conversation like a game of tennis. Most people are used to a constant back and forth. You say something, they respond, you respond back. There's rhythm, predictability. When you stop hitting the ball back, when you just let the silence sit there, the other person doesn't know what to do with it. They scramble, they panic, they start hitting balls at themselves just to fill the void. And in that scrambling, the truth comes out. Because silence creates pressure, not the aggressive kind. The psychological kind. It's a vacuum that demands to be filled. And most people will fill it with whatever they're actually thinking, not the carefully constructed version. This is why interrogators use silence. The question and then they wait. They don't rush to fill the gap. They don't offer an easy exit. They just sit there, calm and patient, while the other person squirms. And eventually, that person talks. They confess. They elaborate. They vow information they never intended to share. Not because they were forced to, but because the silence was unbearable. Your brain is wired to interpret silence, disapproval, as judgment, as something being wrong. When you're talking to someone and they suddenly go quiet, your nervous system registered as a threat. Why aren't they responding? Are they angry? Did I say something wrong? Do they think I'm lying? And those questions in your head until you break. Until you something anything, just to resolve the tension. But if you're the one holding the silence, you don't feel that panic. You're watching them scramble while you stay centered, and that dynamic shift is powerful. Because suddenly they're working to fill the space. They're trying to explain themselves, justify themselves, prove themselves, and you didn't have to do anything except wait. Silence also forces people to confront their own discomfort. In conversation, we're usually so focused on what we're going to say next that we don't actually process what we're feeling. But when there's silence, when there's nowhere to hide, we have to sit with whatever emotion is there. And that can be revealing. Someone who's lying becomes visibly uncomfortable. They fidget. They avoid eye contact. They rush to fill the silence with more explanations that only make the lie more obvious. But someone who's telling stays calm. They might be confused by your silence, but they're not panicking. They don't have anything to hide, so the quiet doesn't threaten them. You can also use silence to set boundaries without saying a word. Someone makes an inappropriate comment. Instead of laughing or brushing it off or getting defensive, you just go quiet. You let the awkwardness hang there, and suddenly they're the one feeling it. They're the one realizing their comment didn't land, that it crossed a line. And they'll often backtrack or apologize without you having to say anything. This works because flex behavior back at people. When you don't react, they have to sit with their own words. Hear them echo in the empty space. And sometimes that's all it takes for them to realize how they sounded, what they actually said, how it came across. Your silence becomes a mirror. There's also power in refusing to engage with nonsense. Someone is trying to provoke you. bait you into an argument, get a reaction. And the instinct is to defend yourself, to explain, to counter their points. But what if you just don't? What if you let their words fall into silence and don't give them the fight they're looking for? That's disarming, because they were expecting a reaction. They were prepared for you to engage. But your silence robs them of that satisfaction. This isn't my energy. You're not worth my energy. And that message lands harder than any comeback ever could. Silence can also communicate confidence in a way words can't. When you're talking, explaining, you signal insecurity. You're working too hard to convince people. But when you can sit comfortably in silence, when you don't need to fill every gap, you project a different energy. You seem grounded, self-assured, like you don't need validation or approval, like you're fine. And that confidence makes people trust you more. Because someone who's comfortable with themselves, they're not performing, they're not seeking anything, they're just present. And that authenticity is magnetic. But here's where most people struggle. They can't tolerate silence themselves. They're the ones who feel the pressure to fill it, who get anxious when a conversation pauses, who rush to keep talking even when they have nothing to say. And that makes it easy to read, easy to control. Because someone who's comfortable with silence can steer the entire interaction just by choosing when to speak and when to stay quiet. This is especially powerful in negotiations. You make an offer, the other person counters, and then you just wait. You don't immediately respond. You don't try to justify your position. You just let the side there. And more often than not, they'll lower their price, or sweeten the deal, or give you something they didn't plan to give, because the silence made them feel like their counter wasn't good enough, like they needed to do more. You didn't say a word. You didn't apply pressure. The silence did it for you. Silence creates space for people to think. In most conversations, people aren't really listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. But when you pause after someone speaks, when you give them a moment before you respond, it signals that you're assessing what they said, that it mattered, that you're not just reacting, you're considering. And that makes people feel heard, valued. It deepens the conversation because now not performing either, they're engaging. They're sayings that matter instead of just filling air. And the quality of the interaction completely changes. But silence can also expose you if you're not careful. If you use it manipulatively, if people sense you're wielding it as a weapon, it backfires. They'll see through it. They'll feel controlled, and trust will erode. Silence needs to come from a grounded place, from genuine presence, not from a desire to dominate or manipulate. The most powerful silence isn't strategic, it's authentic. It's you being comfortable enough with yourself that you don't need to perform, don't need to fill every gap, don't need to prove anything. You're just there, fully present. And that presence is what makes people uncomfortable, because most people are never fully present. They're always performing, always managing, always controlling the narrative. And when they meet someone who's doing that, who's just calmly existing in the silence, it disrupts their entire approach. They don't know how to read you, don't know how to manipulate you, because you're not giving them the usual cues. You're not playing the game they're used to playing. This is why silence terrifies people. Not because it's aggressive, but because it's honest, strips away the performance, removes the buffer. It forces people to be real in a way that most interactions don't require. And being real is vulnerable. It's exposing. It's everything people spend their energy trying to avoid. But if you can embrace that vulnerability yourself, if you can sit in silence without needing to escape it, you gain something most people don't have. Clarity, control, power. Not the dominating kind, the self-possessed kind, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it's solidly rooted. You don't have to fill every silence. You don't have to rescue every awkward pause. You don't have to perform just because someone expects you to. You can be quiet. You can wait. You can let other people reveal themselves while you stay centered. And in that choice, in that willingness to let silence exist, you'll see things you never saw before. The truth be the words, the insecurity behind the confidence, the lies behind the explanations, because silence doesn't lie. It just is. And in that pure, unadorned space, everything real rises to the surface. The next time you're in a difficult conversation, let the silence hang. Don't rush to fill it. Don't scramble to make it comfortable. Just breathe. Watch and see what happens when you stop trying to control the narrative and let the quiet do the talking.